Hey guys, this is Sir Big Bank, and I'm here to talk about Battlefield 2042, aka Battlefield 6. Today we're going to talk about the story that's going on in the multiplayer. We're not getting a traditional campaign this time around, so we get to dive directly into the multiplayer. And there's a pretty epic storyline that kind of helps make sense of what's going on in the multiplayer. So here's the timeline, which kicks off and begins around the early 2030s, around 2031. And during this time, the world just gets hit with some major haymakers. A major hurricane impacts the Earth as a Category 6 storm, the highest ever, category assigned to a hurricane. The impact of the storm has lasting effects and forever alters the coastal landscape of the things that were in the storm's path and the surrounding regions. In the couple of years that follow that hurricane event, the world is just at a shortage for fuel and for food, and this causes the world to sink into an economic depression. A casualty of the global economic issues was Germany, that just altogether collapses as a country. And this helps put the European Union on the path to it finally ended up collapsing itself. So all this world upheaval causes people to have to reevaluate their country allegiances. Not only are their countries not able to help, provide and take care of their needs and make things available. A lot of countries are closing their borders and pushing people away aside. So these nationalist folks end up having to band together and become known as what are non-patriotic people, or NOPATs, as they're referred to in the game. NOPATs, non-patriotic. These people are just our families and farmers, doctors, engineers, soldiers, and so on that had to become these non-patriotic NOPATs to survive together. As the timeline continues, we're getting now around the end of the 2030s. After starting around 2031, there's some promise because the world scientific community is finally getting some traction and are having technological innovations that are helping to uh, bring new energy options to the table. Desert irrigation, hydraulic levees, coastal seawalls to reclaim land that was lost to seawater surge, and just so on. Technological innovation, reclaiming the world. Countries just were able to finally get a foothold on reclaiming the farmland that was lost to the weather effects, and starting to rebuild the supply chain of food and fuel. Really, these countries are getting back on their feet now, and looking like starting to resemble themselves. The problem was that at this point there are now some 1.2 billion NOPATs that have been neglected, have been pushed aside, exiled by the governments. And the NOPATs are basically like, nah, we aren't trying to join back up in cities and nations. Not after how you guys are treated us. You want us to be labor just to help strengthen you again after you treated us. And you really start to see leaders and everything emerge within the NOPATs, and they challenge this whole paradigm of the old world powers, and they demand that they now get a seat at the table when it comes to global economics and military and social policy. They want to be represented as a body of NOPATs that have their own needs as a community, as almost a formless country of itself. So of course, in the middle of this, you have the U.S. and Russia as pretty much the only two remaining world powers competing for these limited world resources. So, that's familiar. But you thought the epicness was done. No, things dial up to another level because something happens in space. Space debris storm ends up impacting 70% of the satellites orbiting the Earth, causing them to malfunction and crash to Earth. And this had some devastating effects that, we're talking about no internet, no GPS based navigation systems, no integrated, systems for surveillance, no ability to really forecast weather and broadcast that out. It's bad. In the midst of this, planes are crashing, communication is non-existent. Already degraded global supply chains just grind to a halt, and the food and fuel that was already short, you know, short supply is now critically short. And don't worry about the prices. If you can find it, you'll try to pay what you can. The media estimates that the chaos has contributed to some 100,000 lost lives during this time. Again, we see the NOPATs though starting to get more organized and become more of a force to the point where those soldiers and specialists that was amongst them from these nations that they were driven out of start helping to give the NOPATs a military arm and to help push back on some of these resource needs. But the U.S. and Russia, being the U.S. and Russia, engage in a shadow war, a war where they don't send their own citizens as boots on the ground to go secure these resources. They both broker deals with different leading factions of this NOPAT, conglomerate, and tell them, hey, if you help us secure these resources, if you help us secure this territory, we'll break you off a piece and give you a part of this, or a place to call home for your people. What you end up having is the NOPADs fighting against their own cause and each other, not because they have an allegiance to the U.S. or Russia, but because they need the resources to survive. They need the land to help people. And it's just kind of a sad situation that they're going to war just to survive. That's who you are in the multiplayer campaign. You are a NOPAT fighting for whatever side of the U.S. Russia uh, scenario there that you get placed on, and you're just doing it to survive. So it's a very interesting story. Can't wait till October to dive in and see just how that is played, that all of that is portrayed and seen, and what we get to do in the game. Again, salute to all my shot takers and money makers. This is Sir Bank, and I'll catch you next time.